Namaste. Welcome to Bhakti Yoga Conference 2026, Sacred Community and Walking the Path of Love Together. I'm Happy Jack, founder of Happy Jack Yoga, and our host for today. And this is our second annual gathering, bringing together over 40 beautiful souls, including monks and musicians and scholars and spiritual teachers. So we opened the conference a few weeks ago at Harvard Divinity School. We'll have our closing gathering at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And together we're exploring how bhakti and how devotion can really support us on the spiritual path. As of now, nearly 7,000 beautiful souls have registered for the conference, including Harvard students, bhakti yogis, yoga teachers, and spiritual seekers. It's meant to be a space for spiritual friendship, for shared inquiry, and for heartfelt conversation, as we just had before going live. If you're here live with us, share a message in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from today. And thank you for being a part of this global Sangha. It's now truly our honor to welcome to the virtual stage. I'll put on spotlight while I read a little bio. Please welcome to the virtual stage Dayal Gauranga Prabhu. I'll say a little bio and then we'll bring him off mute. Dayal Gauranga has been on a spiritual journey his entire life, seeking truth from a young age. At 18 years old, he became a monk and dedicated himself to a life of spiritual study, reflection, and service. 1 year later, he made his first trip to India and has since traveled back numerous times throughout the subcontinent, as well as to countries and communities around the world to learn, discover, and share. After 10 years of monastic life, he transitioned out of the monastery, met his dear wife, Rasika, and later married in 2014. His passion for sharing spiritual wisdom stems from his own years of personal work, which continues to this day. He aims to teach, inspire, and work with others who are eager to dive deep into themselves, take responsibility for their own growth, let go of old patterns that no longer serve them, and embrace a new way of approaching life that is filled with potential, opportunity, and purpose. Today we're so excited to welcome Dayal Gauranga Prabhu for a conversation on finding community in an age of isolation. Friends, if you're ready to welcome Dayal Gauranga Prabhu, throw your arms in the air and loudly chant, Haribol! Prabhu, welcome to Bhakti Yoga Conference.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really great to be with you. I'm really honored and grateful and just deeply inspired and admiring the work that you're doing, Jack, with this whole conference from last year to this year, bringing people together, all the speakers. It really is incredible. And I just, I'm sure maybe you hear that or maybe you know that, maybe you don't, but just in case you don't, I just want to let you know that it's really, really incredible. And I'm deeply touched and inspired by the whole project, as well as just being able to be here and be with you. Even if there was nobody here, I'd just be happy having this conversation with you, being in community with you.
It's likewise. I thank you for the kind words, but I feel that with you. Like we first studied together at Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. I was so inspired by you. This is really what's inspired the conference, is this meeting such wise, sincere, incredible, beautiful souls like yourself and just wanting to bring together. And I'm a student just with Abhi and Angie and Justine and Shraddhanjali. I'm a student here to learn, and personally, I was very inspired by you and your path, and likewise, very happy to
Yeah.
just be able to sit here.
I'm thinking of this story I heard of Ayendra Prabhu, who's the late Kirtaniya, who's inspired so many Kirtan artists that we know around the world, who passed away many years ago. And at least the story that was credited to him. And at one point, there were some devotees that came up to him and said, they were begging for blessings, and please, we want to do this, and we want to say, have your blessings. Please inspire us that we can do this and we can do that. We want to do these things in service. And the response was, just do it. Like you don't need the blessings, all the blessings. Just go forth and do it. And I'm thinking of that because you just did it with this conference. Like you just took the initiative to create something so beautiful and bring these people together. And it's such a beautiful thing. And so, when we met and now we're here. And so, yeah, thank you for that, bringing us together.
Well,
So,
I appreciate it. It means a lot. It means a lot from you. I really look up to you. You've been a big part of my journey. But take us back, so before we jump into the topic, I've got some questions prepared. Please share whatever's on your heart. But I mean, 18 years old. I think about who I was at 18, and it was sex, drugs, rock and roll. There was nothing. There was no yoga. There was no spirituality. There was just like indulge in breaking all the four regulative principles for those who know what they are. 18 years old. Like you got really serious about spiritual life. Tell us a little bit about that journey. What brought you to Bhakti Yoga?
Right. Well, there's a lot that can be said there. But yeah, I just always had a deep spiritual calling in my life, which I think all of us do in some ways, right? It was George Harrison who said everyone's looking for Krishna. Some people know it, some people don't, right? And so I think everybody has this search for something deeper and more meaningful. So we have different degrees of being aware of it. And even before I was 18 in high school, I just had this deep yearning to understand some sense of truth. And I was raised in a Western Italian Roman Catholic background, going to church. Didn't really wasn't like I got disillusioned with my religion, spiritual path of origin. But I remember it was in like a junior high class. So I was like 13 years old or 14 years old. And the teacher was teaching world religions, which, you can imagine the depth of study that you're having in a 13-year-old class of world religion. You're just kind of touching on little things. And I knew nothing. This was pre-Google, pre-social media. So it wasn't like I didn't know where certain countries were on a map, if you asked me. I didn't know anything difference between Hinduism or Buddhism or what. But he just said, if this group over here is right, the rest of the world's in a lot of trouble. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, if this group is right, then everybody else is in a lot of trouble, right? If the Christians are right, if the Muslims are right, if this group is right, like with this sense of like we're right and everybody else is, worshiping the false god or the false tenets. And I just took that in. I just thought like, how does that make any sense? Like, good for me if I was born in the right country and the right, religion, like God bless that. But what if I was born in the wrong country? What if I was supposed to be born in Japan or supposed to be born in a different country or a different religion? And it just kind of opened me up to this idea of like, what is universal truth? What is something that applies to everybody? Like, regardless of, yeah, we all have free choice, but by the time you're 18, you're already kind of ingrained in a certain way of looking and doing things. And so it just kind of started a spiritual path. And I just started really just kind of seeking and just had this draw towards the East somehow and a non-materialistic way of life. And in my first year of college at UC Irvine in California, there was a devotee on campus that was meeting with students and would do kirtans and do seminars. And I got a copy of the Bhagavad Gita and a couple of other spiritual books. But it was really when I read the Bhagavad Gita, I actually felt like God was speaking to me. And I felt like I had something that was universal, speaking to the nature of the soul. And I just thought, whatever 18-year-old thinks they're going to do, this is what I want to do with my life. And I dropped out of school, and there was an ashram nearby in a local town. And I just moved in. I slowly just kind of, I did that for 10 years, 5 years in California. Then I eventually came out to New York and, was part of the ashram here and starting a project in Manhattan. And so, and then it's been 12 years since leaving the ashram that I've been married to my wife and still plodding along.
That's so inspiring. I love that. I've never had it explained that way, but yeah, like what if these people are right, then all of those people are in trouble? Like that doesn't make sense. And so that's so mature and wise for you to have those reflections, and thank you for sharing them with us. Just a little bit more of the journey. So you took a risk, or you took a chance, 18 years old, the book made some sense, you went for it. Was there a moment, or like what was it about the experience or the community that made you say, this is it, like I found my people, this is my calling? Because it's one thing to do it as an 18-year-old, but now you're a few years older, you've done this for some decades.
Right. It really was the devotees and the way that I saw them interacting with each other. I just felt like I saw people that had transcended something about the individual being at the center, right? Like everywhere you go in life, whether it's school or even a family, it's a sense of like putting yourself forward and like, kind of me, myself, and I revolving around me. Even if it's not like a largely egotistical, like arrogant, type of mentality, but just a sense of like my primary goal in life is to ensure my happiness and my success or my immediate family. And I just saw something so much bigger where the people in this community had something else that was in the center that wasn't them. And it opened up space for them to treat each other in a different way because there was like a common goal of service. And so I just saw people being, and people were just nice to me, they didn't even know me. And they were nice to me, welcoming. And the way that I saw them treating each other and just having a community that was based on service was really, really inspiring. And I just felt like there was something that drew me into that and wanting to know more and be a part of that.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask a few other little ones. 'Cause I do this whenever I get in your association because I want to extract the wisdom. And
Yeah, ask questions and cut me off because I'll talk the whole time.
we'll get to your topic, but this idea of, I mean, I've experienced that as well. I'm still new, and I can't say I'm there, but like really meeting people who they're not the center of their lives. They've put divinity, they've put Krishna at their center of their lives. Is there like a certain, I know there's many practices and probably association is part of it, but what is it for you that has helped you go from being self-centered, if you were that way? I was self-centered a lot of my life, to actually putting divinity at the center. How did you get that? How did we get to that place?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's interesting because I think there comes to a place where you recognize that is in my best interest, right? Like in some ways, devotees or spiritualists, they're not selfless people. We talk about the science of self-realization. There's just a recognition of what it means to what is ultimately in my best interest, right? And so there is a sense of actually this idea of putting myself in the center doesn't actually work, right?
Right.
And so it actually you come to a space of recognizing, wow, there's actually something greater for myself to experience by taking myself out of the center. It's counterintuitive to like our material way of thinking, but there's something more than that. And so I think there's like both sides of it. One is you kind of have to reach that place where you recognize that things aren't working anymore. This is why I think it's kind of futile. Like we come to realization and then we try to just kind of force everybody else into our worldview. It's like, oh, their clock isn't on the same wavelength as yours. Like they haven't reached that point of recognizing it's not working, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of, that's why I think, Ram Dass mentioned once that we have no right to take away another person's suffering, right? Because we don't know what purpose it's serving another. We can help them, we can hold space for them. And that's what I think if we relate to community, it's like, you know, and myself, like as a coach and as a practitioner that works in other people's lives, it's like people come suffering and it's like, wow, there's parts of me that just want to just take it all away. And there's an expectation, like, fix me, like we come to like sometimes these things that are even religion, like we're bringing our car to the mechanic. Here's what's wrong, fix it. And it's like, oh, we have to go through that process. Um, but at a certain point, as we move through that process, we get to a point of recognizing, okay, wow, this isn't working, and there has to be a different way for me to live my life. And so, for me, I'd reached that point of like very early on in my life of like, wow, what's really going to make me happy? And maybe it just came from observing people around me, observing my own life, but it really was just, it was a selfish endeavor, you know, just like anyone else. But it was really just wanting to understand what's actually going to make me happy and fulfilled. And for whatever reason, I've talked to astrologers, however people believe, like past life impressions, like I just came into this life with an impression of wanting to seek and find God in my life.
Yeah.
For some reason I just had this monastic leaning from very early on. That served me for some period of time, but it's ultimately not my complete life's calling, which is why I changed ashrams and have been married for 12 years.
Amazing. I want to just ask this maybe personal question, or at least I'm just personally interested. How do you get to a place of such clarity? Like I notice that so many of the speakers here, there's just such clarity and just the way you articulate. It's like, damn. I mean, you're saying the things that like make sense to me. Is it a matter of years of practice? Is this like a bhakti thing? Is this something that all of us, newer aspiring bhaktas can look forward to? Is it just like some people have a nature of just like being really well articulated and really good teachers, but it seems that many, at least that have been speaking here, and yourself very much so, there's just like, I don't know. I mean, we didn't prepare any of these questions. I'm just throwing them at you right now, and there's just like clarity. I mean that
Yeah,
seriously.
well, there's so many things I'm not clear on. And so I don't want to give that impression. There's so many things that I'm figuring out in my life and in so many ways that um sometimes feels unclear. It's like courage, right? Some people say like, how do you have courage when there's so many things to be afraid of? And they say, well, that's the when you display courage is when you're is in the face of fear. Like people who have courage, we think, oh, they're not afraid. No, they're afraid, but they're moving through that fear, with in a different way. And so for me, like in clarity, I think it just comes as much as like we're clear on anything, right? Like um I know that if I think you just first of all, I think you spend time with people who have faith and clarity, and it gives you that conviction. You have to spend time with people who imbibe the things that you want, association. And I think it's just, there are very few things that I am clear on, but I think this idea that the material world, we're just kind of going into philosophy, like has a limited capacity to satisfy the deeper yearnings of my soul, that's just like a deep conviction because there's just enough experience around that. I may not be able to fully live that principle. Like I may be stuck in my vices. I may be stuck in my, like, I know there are parts of me that have certain conceptions and holding on to certain ideas, right? It's like you might be addicted to something that you know is wrong and bad for you, but you're still in the grips of it. And so, but there's a clarity, like I know at least that um, where I'm ultimately want to go. And I think that's just as clear as like, there's a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam that talks about in the 11th canto that talks about like the nature of spiritual practice. Like there's like a simultaneous, like it's like a relief from hunger, like in a clarity of conviction that just comes like, how do you know when you're full? Like, how do you know when you're hungry? When you're hungry, how do you know what you want to eat? You know, I don't know. I just know that I'm craving something to eat. And I know that that's going to give me a stomach ache and that's going to make me feel good. I may still eat the ice cream for dinner, right? I may still have potato chips for lunch, but I know that I'm going to feel afterwards and I still might do it, right? But I have a clarity that like, oh, if I have a nourishing meal, I'm going to feel better about myself. And so I think it just kind of, it's a little bit like that. I don't know if that answers your question at all or is
It does. It's
clear.
helpful. I'll bring. I'm going to bring us back to the topic, but thank you. I always love extracting the wisdom, and we're going to share some links under the replay. I mean, you and your wife do some really important work, and so those who feel called to go deeper, definitely stay in touch with Dayal Gauranga. But bring to the topic here. So the title is Finding Community in an Age of Isolation. And so it's interesting because we live in this time where, we feel in one way we're most connected time in history, but yet loneliness is an epidemic. And from your perspective, what do you think, what is the root of this disconnection?
Yeah. Um, well, there's a bit of an external and an internal answer to that question. The external answer is just the way that our lives are structured today, in a modern kind of capitalistic, and I'm not trying to say it in terms of like politics, but just like in the way that we've just shifted away to this like really micro nuclear family structure of living that's disconnected ourselves from the normal social resources that we're supposed to have available to us. Um, and so we've just isolated ourselves in the age of technology where we don't just physically spend time with people, and we've devalued the importance of like family and relationships in our lives. Um, and because I think again, we've just kind of we've condensed things into like really like what is going to satisfy my short-term goals of we've prioritized career, we've prioritized social status, right? We prioritize like money and getting ahead, and everything that doesn't serve that we kind of like push it away. And so, I mean, there's so much we can say about just like the structure of society. Um, but on an internal level, um, I genuinely think it's this losing connection with God, like losing a connection of spiritual connection, of having that first and primary sense of relationship. It's interesting. Like I also work like in relationships and like the idea of romance. You know, the idea of romance in some ways is a modern construct, a few hundred years old at best, like going to the Renaissance era of like Shakespeare and poetry and like you complete me and Juliet saying to Romeo, you are the god of my idolatry, like replacing God with like another person, like you complete me, my twin flame, like this idea that like I have this sense of incompleteness or loneliness in me, and you just need to find the right person, right? And so this idea of like romance and relationship being something that it's really not designed or meant to be, and we just find these ways of like replacing God with other people. It used to be with things, and then it becomes with other people. And so I think like through a lot of the ways in which religion as we know it today, like the externalities of religion that have caused great harm in people's lives, we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so we just kind of like we lose this whole sense of connection to something higher than ourselves, and it just kind of leaves us empty. So I think really it's a spiritual crisis of disconnection from God, and that connection to God leads towards connection with other people, right? Like in Bhakti, you have these different levels of like practitioners, and kind of like the lowest level of practitioner is one who only sees God in the temple, who only sees God in the church, who only sees God in the deity, right? Without recognizing that that God exists in the heart of every living being. And so like that connection to God internally enhances our relationships with others, because we therefore then see every living being as a vessel of God's presence. Um, so
Wow.
those are some thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. What do you think? I mean, we've been talking with some of the speakers, like obviously Sadhu Sangha, you mentioned association, very important. Also, some of us, depending on our nature, it's really nice doing our sadhana, like kind of being in the nature, having some quiet time. Question being, is isolation something that we to be avoided, or can it actually sometimes be a gateway, a doorway to spirituality?
That's a great question. And I think there's a distinction between like loneliness and solitude,
Mm.
right? So like solitude is healthy. Like there's meaningful alone time that we all need to be able to sit with ourselves, right? And the discomfort that we have being alone or being by ourselves is a trailhead to things in ourselves that need attention, right? And so it's good to have an active life, to have relationships, but if all of that becomes a substitute or a veil or running away from the things that I'm nervous to spend time with when I'm just alone, then there's something internally that might need some attention or to look at. And so, both are needed. I think we sometimes live in this either or society. I'm not saying that that's what you're sharing right now, but we need relationships, we need community, we need human interaction on some level. Why? Because ultimately that shows us the things in ourselves that it's like there's no greater school of life than relationships. you know there's no greater school of life than relationships, whether it be like an intimate partner or children or family or friends or being a monk in an ashram living with other monks. Last year I was in India. I taken a group there on pilgrimage, and we were at GEV, and we were sitting at GEV, the Government Eco Village, and having a darshan in a class with Radhanath Swami. And somebody asked a question, about like, you know, how do we live our spiritual life, when we're living, in the world with our jobs and our families, and we're not monks just living here, in paradise or whatever. Something, the question was like that. And it was about the nature of the mind. And Ranat Swami said, you'd be very surprised. He said, you have no idea what's going on in the mind of a monk. You know, they're struggling with their egos. They're struggling with their tensions. It's like, who's going to sleep where on what part of the floor, who's going to do this or that. Like the ego follows you wherever you go. And so those relationships are their stone smoothing mechanisms. And so relationships become the greatest school of our life. So we need that. And we also need solitude and ability to be with ourselves. And 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 in the spiritual context, being with ourselves isn't just being alone, it's being with ourselves and God, you know, alone time with God, alone time with Krishna, like nurturing that like relationship in a tangible, real way. So both are super important, but I think that loneliness is when we have neither. I'm not in connection with other human beings, and I don't feel a sense of connection with God or internally, and I've disconnected myself on all levels, and I'm just feeling like alone. Um,
Yeah, that's so helpful. And so now, like, thinking about sacred community, the theme, is it something that, like, in your experience, you found it? Somebody gave you Bhagavad Gita, you were just like ripe, you moved into the ashram. Is spiritual community something that we're meant to find, or is it something that we're meant to create? Is it something like, how would you encourage some of us to find it, discover it? What does it look like?
yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely both, because in one sense, I was looking, but I didn't find it. It found me. But you also have to, I think, put yourself in a space where you're ready to receive it when it presents itself.
Mm.
So it's kind of like you have to prioritize and be searching and open to looking. And it's also something that you can't forcefully create on your own. Like you have to invite something in and ultimately allow God to present that to you. And it requires you to um, be willing for it to look different than you think it's supposed to be,
Mm.
right? Like we think about normal relationships and what they're based off of. Um, you know, you think about like when we're younger, when we're kids, it's like, do you like the same TV shows as me? Do you like to eat the same foods as me? Okay, cool. We're best friends now, you know? And so spiritual community is like there's a different purpose. It's like, again, Ram Dass quote, sorry, but like we're all walking each other home, right? And so it's less about like, how are you going to enhance my experience of material life because we like the same TV shows or listen to the same music or like the same foods, but it's like, how are we supporting ourselves as we move forward towards a higher shared goal? And we may or may not have mutually compatible material personalities. Granted, there needs to be some level of compatibility. Otherwise, some people just don't get along and need space, right? Doesn't mean that there can be danger in just saying, it doesn't matter who you associate with, just find people, human beings, and, do your spiritual practice with. There needs to be some mutual compatibility, but there also needs to be a higher sense of bringing people together that will allow us to tolerate or overlook some of the more minor um, differences that we might experience, right? It's like, I don't know if I've given this, it's like Arctic penguins, right? That the way they survive in harsh weathers is to gather in groups, right? They huddle up in order to get warmth, right? I don't know if you've heard this before. But they huddle up in groups, right? But the only ones experiencing the warmth are the ones on the middle. The ones on the outside are still freezing, but they rotate,
Ah.
meaning at a certain point, the ones on the outside switch places with the one on the inside, and the ones on the inside go to the outside, right? So the question is, why do they do that? Why would the one in the middle ever agree to go to the outside and take their post there, right? Because they know that if they don't, eventually they're going to be the last one standing because everyone on the outer ring is going to die, is going to freeze. And the outer layer is going to freeze, and then the next layer in is going to become the outer layer, and then they're going to freeze and die, and the next layer become the outer. And pretty soon you got one lonely penguin staying in the middle who's going to freeze. And so there's a recognition that we're in this together. And so it's like, I don't care if you're necessarily like how good looking you might be, Mr. and Mrs. Penguin, or like, do we get along necessarily? Like, we're here on a mission to survive. And so we have to find a way to coexist and share responsibilities. And so the middle one that goes on the outside and they rotate. And so therefore they all survive, even though they have to perform some austerity. And so I think communities are like that in a way also, where we have to recognize like we do need each other on a certain level. Um, and so we participate in that sense of community. So there is a sense of looking for it, of wanting it, of needing it, and putting yourself out there. and at the same time being willing for it to look differently than the way we thought it was supposed to. Um, and otherwise, um, we're gonna reject everything, and we're gonna end up being isolated and alone.
That is such a great example, the visual of the penguins. And I haven't spent much time in Vrindavan, but I was there in December and I saw the monkeys doing that. I don't know that they were rotating, but you could see the monkeys in like groups of 20 of them huddled up.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense. And I wanted to ask about, because you talked about this idea of, serving God, of, walking together towards the same truth. And we have devotees on the call who obviously are very connected to Krishna. I know we've got 12-step friends here who have connected to a higher power. We hear a lot, though, in the yoga community, people even have a hard time saying that three-letter G word, God.
Mhm.
And how did you, this maybe just like a little personal question, but it could be helpful for some. What convinced you that there is a God? You alluded to a little bit, but like, what convinced you that, like, yeah, that made you, I'm a theist, I believe in a higher power? What do you think?
That's a great question, and I honestly wish I had a better answer for you, other than what's true for me is that I've never not believed in God.
Okay.
I've never struggled with that atheistic part of me or that exists in others. I've never not I've always just even from a young age just knew that there was a God, and that God, there was fear of being forgotten by God, or being, disconnected from God, or losing that connection, or there was confusions around God, like sometimes feeling like I know who or what God is and then not, and reconciling things that you would see in the world. And but I just, I don't know, call it from a previous life, or brainwashing from my childhood, or something in between. But I've always had this, and even, I would go to church with my family, but even there was times where I would just go by myself as a kid. Um, so I don't know what that is or where that's from, or I don't mean to alienate people who struggle with the idea of God. But for me, it was just always just like a clear, just like the existence of the sun or the wind, or it just felt so, um, there used to be this debate of Carl Sagan and somebody else, I forget her name, but one was like, they were both scientists, but one was an atheist and one was a theist. And one would ask the other question. They said, with everything that you know about science and physics and the world, how is it possible that you believe in God? And the response to the question was, with everything that you know about science and physics and the world and how everything works, how could you not believe in God? You know, you know, you
Yeah.
know.
No,
And so
that.
there's just this sense of, or they'll say like the difference between, and I don't pit scientists and theists like different. Like we talk about science as being separate from spirituality. Like I think there's an interlinking there, but they'll say that I've like the difference between like a scientist, atheist and a theist, is that scientists only have to believe in one miracle.
Okay. Right.
You know, we call that the Big Bang. We call that
Right.
everything somehow came from nothing. And it's like you
Yeah.
try to this irreducible sense of, it's like you just kind of pocket off that miracle aside, and then everything else you just try to explain through, science. And so I just always knew there was some inexplicable aspect to life, and that God was there.
Well, thank you for your honesty, and it's helpful hearing different perspectives. We had Vishaka Dasi right before you this morning, and she spent her first 20 years as a strong atheist, and then she met Prabhupada. So it's helpful to hear different journeys. I'll bring us back to the topic because you just keep saying things that are so helpful. Seva. So we've been hearing sometimes about seva, selfless service. How important is seva in forming these deep bonds between people, like in a community?
Yeah, seva is the foundation of relationships, right? I mean, even going back to like that example of the penguins, right? Like the
Yeah.
whoever's on that outer ring, they're performing their seva for the betterment of the whole. And so I think seva is what takes us out of the me and the center mentality, right?
Yeah.
And so bhakti is the sense of, I don't want to be the center, I want to serve the center.
Wow.
And so as long as I'm trying to be the center and we're all trying to be the center, there's conflicts, you know, where it's, you know, we're entering into the world of conflict because we're trying to get everybody to align with my sense of center, right? Whether it's warring communities or warring sports teams or warring nations, right? Like our center is here, your center is there, trying to pull you into my center.
Yeah.
And so I think that seva becomes that piece of what takes me out of the center, ultimately gives me a greater sense of joy and satisfaction internally. The question becomes what I think what a community is when you find a common center, right?
Mm.
There has to be an agreement on what that center is. Um, and so, you know, that's spiritual community.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And so I'm just thinking, you know, we're obviously connected here. We're in this satsang. We're on this journey together, which is beautiful. If somebody's watching the replay and they're feeling alone in this moment, what
Mm.
is like one small courageous step that we could take towards creating this connection, towards having what you're describing? You know, this idea of community with a common purpose. What's one step?
Right. Um, that's a great question. And I'm just thinking of a few things. Um, because what I don't want to do is just give some like fluffy words that like don't land or aren't sensitive to like the real loneliness that people experience. Um, but what I will say is that, you know, I think what loneliness does, or even like depression or just like heavy feelings, it 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 weighs on us like an identity, like I'm uniquely alone, like I'm uniquely struggling with something that everybody else seems to have figured out. And I think it's helpful to sometimes know that that's not true, that like there is this epidemic of loneliness that we all experience, and it's a shared human experience. And I think that we sometimes get into spaces of thinking like we try to reason it like I got dealt a bad lot in life, or I made mistakes in life, and therefore I don't have this, like my marriage failed, or my parents weren't this way, or my career failed, or I don't have enough money, or we look at it and just like it just seems that everybody else is kind of connecting and I'm alone. And I just think that that lie is not helpful because I think that like there's a sense of just knowing that actually like, you're not alone in your loneliness. It's something that's like felt and shared from by people all over the world, you know, myself included in my own life, right? And so one is like that remembrance. The second thing I think is just a remembrance that like it's not permanent, right? Like this period of there's a period of like even when you said like Vishaka came in 20 years of life as an atheist, what I was thinking about mine is like no one's really an atheist. We just kind of take breaks from recognizing or seeing God in our life, in this life or another, right? Because our constitutional position as spirit souls is in relationship with the whole, right, and the complete. But then we kind of have this journey in the material world for some period of time. We kind of break away, and so our nature is to be connected, and at some period of time we feel disconnected and we feel lonely. So it's just it's a period of time in this life over lifetimes. But our natural position is to be connected. And I would just if you're listening to the replay feeling lonely, just the small step you can take is just lean into the experience of this moment. That
Mm.
there's a person speaking to you right now, maybe in a recorded video or, you know, on another part of the world, and there's a guy named Happy Jack who's organizing a conference to reach out down into your life and just give you a little reminder that actually, like, no, you're not alone. Like God has not forgotten you, evidenced by this video being sent into your life right now. And so just lean into that little moment experience of, wow, what if I'm not as truly alone as I think I am? And to just honor that there's a part of me that feels deeply alone. And there's also something in me that I can connect with that might be able to see that I'm not as alone as as I think I am, and start to just open myself up to that a little bit more.
It's so helpful. Thank you for taking the time to just really receive that and connect to the listener. Like it was really genuine. I felt that. What would you say? What role can bhakti play in healing the loneliness of modern society?
Right. The role that bhakti can play in healing the loneliness in modern society is by reminding us that there's something greater than ourselves that we can connect to. And I think the beauty of bhakti is the universal nature of it, right? That it, Krishna will say is in the Gita, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, that if one offers me a leaf of flower, fruit, or water, like this, the simplest of things. I just listened to something and there was a quote that I was referencing. Anyways, I'll just share the principle of it. But like, we kind of have this, I'll share this reference. I was once in Cleveland, Ohio, years ago. I was living as a monk in the Brahmacharya ashram and there was uh, a celebration of life for His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who had passed away, a couple years prior, that Ranaswami was good friends with. And they were having some like event or festival in a park in Cleveland, Ohio. And Ranaswami had arrived in a car. He got out of the car. Somebody was sharing some praise or appreciation for him, like, Mars, this class or this kirtan that you gave was amazing. And Mars just like got out of the car and looked around as like somebody seeing the world for the first time and just said, everything is amazing. Like he was just truly just like having this moment of just like, everything is amazing. Like, wow, look at this tree, look at this bird, look at you, right? And so I think that bhakti allows us to have a deeper sense of connection with what we would normally consider the mundane. And there is a sense of like the material versus the spiritual, and like material bad and spiritual good. But I think bhakti has this way of allowing us to see the presence of God in everything in our life. And so whether it's the mundane things of just like looking out and being in nature, or even like our relationship, or even our hardships and our challenges, of finding a way for us to see God and turn that into an expression, of seva. Like seva doesn't have to be that I'm going to the church and, tithing, or it doesn't have to be I'm going to the temple and offering a flower to the altar. Like John Muir said that nature is God's temple. John Muir, the pioneer of nature, and specifically in California, which is where I'm from, John Muir trails. Nature is God's temple. And so just the idea of even like your breath can become an offering. The fourth chapter of the Gita describes all these ways in which sacrifice can be made. And as simple as the breath, like how can the breath become an offering and a moment of connection to God? Like how can I offer like every action of my life? Bhakti allows us to see the divine in every molecule of creation and create an opportunity of service in that God can receive in that simple moment. This step, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to cook a meal, I'm going to have a conversation, and like it allows us just to invite God's presence in a very tangible way, through awareness, through presence, and through service. And so, and community is what reminds us of that, because Gauranga Prabhu, I think, maybe gave a seminar here earlier in this conference. He said that Sangha is just people coming together to exchange hope, to remind ourselves that, yeah, that's true, because I think we have doubting aspects of our mind that like, is that really real? Is God really sitting there in that flower or whatever it might be? And we remind ourselves like, no, yeah, you're right. Keep going. You're doing great. Yeah. See God in nature. See God in that, whatever it might be. There was the last example. There was once, I think somebody there was with Prabhupada, and they think they were on a plane or something. Or there was something, they saw a movie, and Prabhupada was seeing a clip of Charlie Chaplin. Prabhupada was laughing, right? And devotees were bewildered, like, Prabhupada's watching a movie. It's like a mundane comedian or whatever, He's supposed to be the guru. And Prabhupada was just appreciating Krishna's humor. He was saying like, he was like making connection, like laughter is a rasa in the spiritual world. And he was seeing this, and he was like making a connection that, like this experience of laughter has its source in something greater. And so it's like the simplest things, we can connect that back to God or to Krishna in some way, and feel a little less alone in that.
Mm. I love that. You mentioned the word hope. What gives you hope, Prabhu?
You do in this conference, and the people on this Zoom chat right now, all 40 whatever us, and those watching the replay. Yeah. seeing other people serving and striving and um, gives me hope.
That's beautiful. Okay, I got just a few more. We're gonna open it up to audience Q&A and reflections. Haven't done this before. Rapid questions. One word that defines true community.
Sacrifice,
Wow, good one. One quality you most value in a spiritual friend.
openness,
Love it. One practice that keeps you connected daily.
breathing.
Nice. Good. And so I just one more final question, then we're going to take some reflections and audience Q&A. If everyone listening could walk away with like one realization about community, something they don't just understand, but they actually feel it, what would you want that to be?
Something that they walk away understanding of community, they feel that they are worthy of community
Wow, that's good.
and that they don't have to do anything other than be themselves to be worthy of that community.
Wow, that's powerful. We had one of our speakers, Sadhviji, spoke, and we asked her if she could speak into the ear of all the world leaders right now, what would you say? And she would whisper, "You are enough." And so this
Mm.
very much aligns with what you're sharing. That's I've yeah, I need to hear that myself. So thank you, Prabhu. But we'll open it up to audience Q&A. We got some beautiful souls here live. You're welcome to raise your virtual hand, or else I love calling on people. Let's get Abhi back on, because we were just having a fantastic conversation before we went live. Our friend from Tamil Nadu. Reflections, questions. Abhi, welcome back.
Um, that was a lot, and thank you so much. Um, yeah, I was just thinking about this word, self-centeredness, which you were mentioning about, and I think it's on my mind for a while now, because the way I looked at it earlier was different, and now it's different. I should say that I'm really blessed to have. It's been a few months, but to have had a few people, elders in my life, who have shown me what it means to be myself, to want to hold both the divine and human parts of me, to um, people who allow me to be vulnerable, hold space for me, don't dismiss my. It's been really beautiful. So, but I don't. So, what I don't understand is I think I confuse self love with self centeredness, which could come from a lot of things and requires work. But I just wanted to ask you about that. I don't clearly understand what self-centeredness is. It's not self-love. It's not self-acceptance. But what is self-centeredness? Is it exploitation of someone, or especially
Yeah.
when you were, yeah.
Um, do you want to say something, Jack, or you want me to say
I
something?
mean, I can share what you give the official response, but I can respond because I feel like I've spent 40 something years being self centered. Basically, just like as Prabhu said, just kind of looking out for myself, not in a bad way, not that I'm doing bad things to others, but it's like, hey, how can I make sure that my needs are taken care of, that I've got the comforts that I want, like just kind of focused on myself primarily. And I think Dayal Gauranga Prabhu said, to some extent, we all have that, but then this idea of in spiritual life and in bhakti, where we can hold hands together, look towards Krishna, but I don't know. You say more. You're more clear, please.
No, it's a beautiful answer, and I'll just elaborate on what you said. That I think it goes back to this idea of self. Like, who am I? What is self? What does it mean to be like self-centered or self? self-ish or self-care or self-love. Like I think it all goes back to the idea of like what is self and what does my self need? Like if I think that I have some ego identity of self, right, in the world that needs something, there's an incompatibility with that and the needs of other people, right? Because if I'm like, I need to be, what is my ego identity in the material world needs? It needs to be the best. It needs to be number one. It needs to have a certain number of resources that like other people are competing for. So and as soon as we establish ourselves in a material identity, we're now in competition for a limited number of resources, whether it be like physical resources like money or land or titles, or just reputational resources like to being the best or being, seen as the top or whatever it is. But in a spiritual sense of recognizing self, there's an unlimited amount of resources because there's an unlimited capacity of God's love that's available for all of us. And so I think that self-centeredness in a material sense is when I identify with something external and then I buy into the story that my happiness lies in satisfying the needs of that external identity, right? And then we kind of we externalize anything that gets in the way of that, right? And so we become willing to even cause harm knowingly or unknowingly to other beings in the pursuit of trying to get that because that becomes my goal. Whereas like self self-interest in a spiritual sense has a different understanding of who I am, and I don't have to like there's enough for all of us to get what we want in that construct. Um,
That was helpful.
does that speak to your question?
Yeah, it does.
Great
Yeah.
question, Abhi. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here. You're such a bright light energy. Let us send the love, high vibes to Tamil Nadu representing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna go on a whim here before we come to Karunaka. Love to check with our friend Amber in sunny Florida. Amber's like longtime member of our yoga community, teaches badass yoga classes for our community. I notice you've been here kind of listening in on many of the calls,
Yeah.
reflections on Bhakti Yoga, on the talk today. What's on your heart?
Oh man. Well, uh, I've really enjoyed every call that I've been able to attend. Usually the second calls of the day. Um, and yeah, I'm really just soaking up all the information and love and this conversation also is beautiful and it is really resonating with me. And it's reminding me of of a quote that was referenced by Rudolf Steiner from Johannes Kepler. So, in relation to science and God being not something that's like separate from each other. So, Kepler talked about the discovery of the solar system, and it was revolutionary. And people at that time were really against science. They thought it was ungodly. And he said a very beautiful long quote that I can't fully quote right now, but it was along the lines of there was no way that he could have done it. There was no way he could have made those discoveries because they literally came to him through a divine vision. So, yeah, that's just been on my mind since you said that. So I'm really appreciative of all these calls, and yeah, it's all really been resonating.
Well, thank you for sharing and reflecting. And I know if we together with Amber and many of our community new to Bhakti, and it's just hearing different perspectives, different voices. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Let us send our love, gratitude, our dear friend Amber down in sunny
Thank
Florida
you.
in the house. Give our love to Ethan as well. All right, we got Karnika up next. Welcome back, Karnika.
Hi, Jack. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My question is, you mentioned about loneliness and solitude. So, how to get to that stage of solitude where we are comfortable with ourselves and be in bhakti, where we are just self, it's a path, but how? What can we do more to be comfortable with that solitude?
I gotcha.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say start small. I think sometimes we just kind of like jump into feeling like, okay, I need to practice solitude, so let me just spend the day alone completely, or go on a 10-day silent retreat, or whatever it might be. But it might just be like, can I spend 5 minutes without my phone? Um, you know, and so I would just say, like, just start really small and just notice what comes up in that space. Maybe just notice the parts of you that are resistant to solitude. Right? And that's a good place to start. And rather than forcing yourself into solitude, spend some time with that and just noticing that, you know. It's interesting. I heard a joke, or a comedian speaking about, 30 years ago, nobody was talking about mindfulness. Why? Because we were forced into mindfulness all the time. You were eating a meal, you were just eating your meal. You weren't checking the news, mindfulness, you went to the bathroom, you were just, you went somewhere, you were waiting in line, you were just waiting in line. That's what you did, mindfulness, And so we've kind of like, we've robbed ourselves because we have available distraction at every moment, right? It's like, I'm going for a walk, I'm going to the store, I'm waiting in line, let me check something. And it's like, we're wiring our brain to be distracted. And some of that is by design, by technology. It's the way it's designed. And some of it is also just because we're uncomfortable with just what's here. So for some of us, I'll end here as maybe just to make it simple. Before we can jump to the space of solitude and being alone with ourselves, we need to confront the resistance or the parts of us that are uncomfortable with that, and learn to befriend that. And yeah, make friends with that.
Thank you. That
You
really
got it.
answers.
I love that. There's like a compassion and a honesty and integrity in that. That's beautiful. What a great response. Nice question. Karnika, remind us, you're calling it, it's not Missouri. Where are you again?
It is
It is
Columbia,
Missouri.
Missouri.
It is
Yeah.
Columbus, Missouri. Nice. Okay, well, let's send
Thank you.
love, Columbus, Missouri in the
Thank you
house.
so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And bring it home. Final one. Swati, representing Team Mumbai in the house. The bright light of Mumbai. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. Actually, you mentioned that point that like see everything in the connection of the divine. I could really resonate with that because I heard in the lecture that when it's lightning outside, the color of the clouds, dark clouds, is actually the color of Krishna. So I could really resonate with that point. And by the way, my question is that you mentioned that lean into the experience and like if I open myself to the more. So you mentioned that open myself more. So like how are we supposed to open ourselves more? If you could walk through that point more.
Open ourselves up more to, like, to just to receiving that experience of not being alone or having community. Yeah. I think that there's genuine pain and hurt that people are carrying as a residue of the negative experiences we've had in relationships and community. Like, there's disappointment that we felt, whether it be like the pain of a relationship or the pain of an absence of a relationship. Some of us, it's like our family situations were very harsh and intense, and they created impact because of the actions that were done to us. Some of us, the pain is of what wasn't done to us, the lack or neglect or the emptiness. And so it's naturally going to be difficult for some of us, or parts of all of us, to feel comfortable opening ourselves up, because to be open feels dangerous, right? So sometimes it's like we don't, my conviction and belief is that even if it doesn't seem like it, there's access somewhere to connection in our lives. It may not look like the way we think it's supposed to look, but there's access to connection, whether it's physical, virtual, or combination. But there's also hesitancy in all of us because we're afraid of something happening again, whether it's a conscious or unconscious fear, right? And so sometimes for some of us, before we can open ourselves up to being in relationship or community, we need to address and care for the pain that's in us that was experienced when we had painful experiences in relationships or community. And that can be relationships with like parents and family, relationship with intimate partners, friends, or even in spiritual communities. You know, there are, because we're material conditioned beings trying to figure it out, you know? And so we're going to get hurt sometimes, even in a spiritual community. And sometimes that can be the hardest, right? We get hurt in a spiritual community. And so I would say don't force yourself to just do something that feels like unsafe or uncomfortable. But again, just try to understand what those pain points are. And like ultimately at the end of the day, we become the ones, like there also has to be like a strong sense of self relationship, right? Like, no, we need community, but no one's going to provide for us what we ultimately have to provide for ourselves. And you know, that's a whole journey in and of itself. And so I think it just starts with like what are some of the parts in me needing from myself right now before I can open myself up to receiving love and care and connection from another person. And to honor that and to allow for that is a part of the process.
I have one follow-up question. Can I ask?
Please, of course, go.
Okay, so you mentioned that some of us may have like a very trauma or like family issue or whatever that might be. So let's assume that there's some family issue, and as being a child, we can't really live that family, and like the family is giving trauma. It might be physical or like mental. So how would you say in that moment, how is one supposed to like tolerate that or like help themselves?
Yeah, as children, we don't have that agency, unfortunately, and it's very sad. Like we're just children get subjected to mistreatment and abuse, um, and that's why we have agencies, and there's at least in America we have child protective services and things that we try to do to support children. As adults, we have that agency, and as adults we have that agency, and we have choices, and so again, I can't speak to anybody's specific circumstances in their life. And I think this sometimes get overlooked or missed in spiritual circles or communities that like there's a base level of safety that we all need in our lives to do anything, even to do our meditation or to chant or to read or to study. Like there's a base level of safety that we need in our lives. And so as adults, we we have the choice and the agency to whatever that looks like, to put ourselves in a place of safety before we can move forward and do anything else in life, because otherwise we can't focus on anything if something is pressing in our sense of safety.
Great questions, Swati. You're amazing. I can't teenager that we look to as our Shiksha guru. Let's send some
No.
high vibes to
Thank you so
Swati.
much.
Yeah, no, thank you for your
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you so much for your time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, oh my goodness, this is just so good. I really mean that genuinely when I talk about the clarity and just, it's so helpful. So we're going to have links under the replay so you can get to Dayal Gauranga Prabhu's website, his Instagram, stay connected. What would you leave us with? Parting words. This is the final virtual session before the finale, this long marathon, and it was very heart-centered, so we appreciate that. But as we kind of step forward on this path of Bhakti Yoga, what would you wish for us, leave us with?
I'm thinking of George Harrison's song, All Things Must Pass. because I'm thinking of some of us that might be listening or not listening, and life just is really hard, and life feels tremendously lonely, and all the little tips in the world may or may not feel like they're helping. And so sometimes the greatest reminder we can have is for somebody to look into our life and see that it's not always going to be this way if it feels that way, because it's not our constitutional position. And so we're offering hope that um, all things must pass, and we're making our way home, even if it feels dark or grim or challenging or lonely, that it's not going to be that way forever in this life or another. And that I'm very clear about.
We feel that, and that's beautiful. I love your referencing the great George Harrison. We'll have to go listen to that. And but thank you so much for your time, Prabhu. Just so grateful you're back for the second year. You're definitely going to be back again for the third year of Bhakti Yoga Conference. But friends who are watching the replay, friends who are here live with us, thank you for being on the journey. We will connect again soon. Stay tuned for details on the final session. We'll get you in touch with Dayal Gauranga Prabhu. And friends, wishing you an amazing rest of the day. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol,
Thank you.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So very much.
Okay.